Welcome back to my channel and to Under My Needle Quilting Studio. I appreciate you being here today, and I have a very special project I'll be working on this week that I'm sure you'll be interested in following clear to the end so that you'll learn all of the things that I'm doing. This quilt is over 50 years old, and I'm going to be restoring it and repairing it so that it's almost as good as new. I'll have 4 things during this session that I'll be doing on this quilt. The first one is that I will be repairing some of the fabric on this. The second thing is some of the cross stitching needs repair. The third thing that I'll be doing will be some of the quilting that has come undone. And the very last thing will be the finish around the edge. Some of that has come undone or it's worn. So you'll need to stay clear till the end of this session to be able to see all of those things and see how I achieved success in restoring this beautiful quilt. Here is a tear or a worn spot in this quilt right here that is a little bit frayed, and I'm hoping that I can get some of those frayed threads from the fabric that I can join the outer 2 edges together so that I cover up that fray, and I also cover up that hole. So I'm going to try to almost seam these 2 together with something called a ladder stitch, or a connecting stitch, and I'm going to do it with this white thread. And as I'm doing that, let me tell you about where I got this quilt and when I got it and why I did it. I got this quilt. My mother said that my mother found this quilt in a store, and she liked it because she had an old brass bed, and it was the brass bed that she was born in, and so she wanted to have a really nice quilt for that bed. And so she was the one that purchased the kit for me, but she didn't want to do the cross stitching. She knew it was going to take a long time, and I enjoyed cross stitching. She didn't really like cross stitching, so I started it when I was a junior in high school, and I knew all along that this wasn't going to belong to me. It was going to belong to her and my father, and that's the way it was. And when it all got finished, she also knew that all I really could do at the time was cross-stitching. I was not a quilter. That wasn't something I enjoyed. I didn't know anything about it. But she had 5 sisters, and those 5 sisters and some of their daughters decided that they'd do this for my mom. That they loved my mother just like I did. So once it was finished, they got together and they quilted it on a great big a thing that looked like 4 boards, the old ways that you used to quilt quilts. That's how they did it. And it took them, they'd work on it and get together for lunch. And they lived in different cities and different counties, but they'd get together about once a month or maybe twice a month, and they'd work on it together. And it didn't take them that long, with all of them there and some of their daughters and some of my cousins. I think they had it finished in about 3 or 4 months. I don't know, because I was at college at that time and I wasn't paying that much attention to it. But when they got it finished, I was out of college and I was working in the area where my one main aunt lived, and so I could drop in on them and see them as they quilted and see the progress of this. And they did such a beautiful job. You actually can tell that different people did different areas because their stitches, some of their stitches were just so tiny and fine, and others of them were tiny and good, but they were not as even. But anyway, you can tell that a number of people helped with this quilt. So that kind of makes it fun too, and it makes it really fun to know all of the women that did this. They didn't write their names on this, but I remember, and when I write the history for my son on this, I will make sure to include that. Okay, I have kind of mended that, and it doesn't look great, but the raw edges are not hanging out anymore. I'm going to work on it just a little bit more so that it looks a little bit better, but that is how you would join. You would just kind of join that into a seam, or, you know, go back and forth and stitch it so that your raw edges come together, and that looks fairly good right there. Here I have another tear, and this tear, if you'll notice, has these threads that are stray. I also have batting that's coming out of here, so this is what I call a kind of ragged tear. It needs some work before I can actually put things back together again. So I brought my scissors in, and I'm going to get rid of some of this raggedness. I don't need that poking out at all. So I'm just cutting it off and getting rid of it. And this area around here that's torn is fluffy with, you know, thread that needs to just be trimmed back just a little bit because it's kind of furry and it's going to be harder to work with. So if I clean it up a little bit, it will be a lot easier to repair that, and it will look so much better. I have taken some white cotton fabric to put down in there and attach so that this will be a clean finish. And I cut that the size that I thought that I was going to need, and I cut it a little bit too big. So I'm going to trim that down. I tried to fit it in there, and it wasn't happy going in. It was too big. So I'm trimming this little piece of fabric down so that it fits in there nicely, and it's just like a patch that will fit in there. And that way I can finish the edge of that tear that I have and have something in there to attach to other than just the batting. So I'm going to take this little patch that I have, and I'm going to put it inside that tear to stabilize that, and I'm going to make it so that it's flat. You'll notice that it was like a circle because I didn't want it to have any raw, you know, any rough edges or anything that had to be turned. So I made it circular, kind of oval, and I'm putting that down in there so that it will become the stabilization for this patch that I'm putting right here. So once that's in there, then I will take all of those raw edges that I had, and I will attach that as I go around. I'll attach that to this piece. I'll turn those little edges under and attach that. And other than this is old fabric and this is new fabric, at least it's white fabric, and I've made a clean, nice repair on that area. There's an area right up here that is really a flippin' mess. And the reason it's a flippin' mess is because it's in an area of a great deal of quilting. And so I'm going to have to unpick all of that quilting to get to that. I'm going to have to replace some batting. I'm going to have to, there's a tear, then there's a big gaping hole. So this is going to be a major repair right here. When I'm finished doing all these, I'll happily share these with you so that you can see how they turned out. I think they'll turn out great. But I wanted to show you about that piecing and putting that down inside, and then that becomes the stabilizer inside. It's almost like applique, but it's an inside applique, and you're turning those edges under so that you don't have a raw edge anymore, and it will look really good. It will just be fine. I'm sure all of those women that worked on this quilt would be happy with the repair that I've given to it, and they wouldn't be critical at all with what's going on. So the next thing I'll be doing, I've noticed a lot of things right in this area, and they've bugged me. So I think what I'm going to do, instead of moving to the edge of the quilt right now, is I'm going to move to the cross stitching in this area, and I'm going to finish all of the repairs that I need to on the fabric, and I'm going to finish this whole area before I tackle that edge, because that edge is going to be a major piece of construction on this quilt. I'm going to be working on this area right here, doing the cross stitch, and I didn't know how many threads I used when I was cross stitching. I didn't remember that, and so I actually took some of these and undid them and picked them, and when I did that, some of this thread just fell apart. So that was a real eye-opener to me. I guess with the rubbing and the everything that maybe, you know, through the years had happened, some of it just almost kind of disintegrated, just like the fabric, which kind of, some of it disintegrated. So I have these 2 needles threaded. I found out that I used 3-ply of the DNC, so you have 6 strands with a DMC thread if you buy it in the floss like this. And so I just separated it out into lengths about as long as from my wrist up to my armpit. A little bit longer than that, but that's a good length to do it. Put a knot in it and I'm ready to go. I started unpicking these because once I started looking at all of this, I noticed that there would be a teeny color difference between what is now and what was then, and I want it not to look too funny. So in this area anyway, I'm going to be unpicking all of these X's that are in the center of the gold, and I'm going to be doing those X's completely over again. I also noticed as I've gone around this part here, there's a lot that has come undone, and so I need to look a little bit more carefully. I was not aware that things were quite at this stage with the cross stitching. I'm going to have to go through this whole quilt with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that I get everything done. When I originally did this quilt and did the cross stitching on it, it was just this white sheet of fabric with printed cross stitching on it. So when I cross stitched, you could go from front to back and back and in this motion, and you know, just do a regular cross stitch, and you didn't have to worry about what the back, you know, looked like, because you knew it was going to be attached to another back. Now I have to be a lot more careful because I don't want my cross stitch stitches to go through to the back of my quilt and show. So I'm going to have to go through the first layer of fabric and maybe a little bit of the batting and then come back up. So I'm going to have to be a little bit more careful than originally because I do not want the cross stitching to show on the back. So we're going to get busy with that right now. I'm going to start, you know, right here. I might come to some areas. You'll notice this has got a knot in it, so I'll have to, at some point in time, I'm going to have to cut that out. All of these little frayed things, there's some knot that's probably tied into this area right in here. So following it was an interesting thing because you don't have a path to follow it on the back. You have to just by guess and by golly. But anyway, that's what it looks like after I've started unpicking it. And now I'm going to just be doing the cross stitches inside these gold flower petals. And I'm going to start with this one right here, and it has a tail. So I've got to get rid of that tail with my scissors. And I'm not sure that knot's going to come out. In fact, it's not going to come out. It's probably going to stay hidden in there until I maybe find it elsewhere. But see, this has got the same thing going on. There's a knot in there. So I'll do the best I can. But a lot of these, they have a knot that's now inside the quilt. So I can poke at it a little bit and try to get rid of them, but it's not going to be a major problem for me. And nobody is going to play and criticize what I'm doing. So this quilt is not going to be entering any quilt contest. It's been in quilt shows, but it's not going to be entering any quilt contest for, you know, being the best repaired quilt on the planet. So I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to do the best I can and be happy with it. And I'm sure my son is going to be happy with it. So you come through just like you would in sewing. You knot it and then you come through your fabric and pull your knot through. And here, your cross stitch is supposed to go from here down to almost here. And I'm just taking the cross stitch. I'm doing the whole cross stitch at one time. So there's that. And then I go back through. And then I'll come down to this other cross stitch down here in the petal. And I'll do the exact same thing. I'll go through that, up there like that, back again, and through. And there are some places here in this wreathy area where the thread has come, it's come out. So I'm going to take my thread clear over to there, and I'm going to go across some of those. Like there's a little cross stitch here that has come undone, and there's one here that has come undone. So I'm just going to go back and do the cross stitching that has come out through the years, either come out or disintegrated like I showed you before. But this isn't hard work, but I do want to show you the back. None of my stitching is going to come through the back. This repair all has to be done on the front. And if you want it to retain, you know, its original form or how it was originally made, and I do. So it's not hard to do. It's just you have to remind yourself to do it that way. And it's fun and it's leisurely and I'm enjoying it a whole bunch. So here I go. And it goes relatively fast. Right now I'm just finding places, stitches that have come completely undone. And believe it or not, there's more than I thought. I hope I'm not going to run into this through the whole rest of the quilt. I'm not as fast at cross stitch anymore as I used to be. I used to be pretty fast, and I used to be, I think I was pretty good. Now I'm not bad, but I'm just, it isn't what I do most of my time. So I'm not as fast and I'm not as accurate probably as I was at one time in my life. Okay, I've come to a point now where I have filled in those cross stitches that needed to be done. I need to go back up because I need to fill in this leaf up here again. So I'm just running my thread through the layers, taking it back up, and I'm going into here to just catch those two cross stitches that are in that teeny little petal of the flower. So I'm really running through the center of this quilt to get some of this cross stitching done, which is fine, and it doesn't appear that that's showing through. So I'm happy about that. If it were showing through, I wouldn't be doing so much running through with fabric. But it doesn't appear to me like it's showing. So I'm going to just keep doing it that way because it's the faster way to do it, and it will look great. So stay tuned and see how this turns out, but it sure is starting to look nice. I'm really quite happy with it. Well, we're ready to tackle that binding or that area that is bound on the edge of my quilt that needs to be fixed. There's lots of little tears, there's lots of stitches that have come undone, and so I'm going to share with you my process. Here is some white fabric that I've chosen, and it matches really well with the quilt, and it's just 100% cotton. I tore it at about an inch and a half along the crosswise grain from selvage to selvage, and once I had done that, then I took it and I folded under each of the raw edges less than 1/4 of an inch, because these are going to be what are going to be the finished edges, and you'll see me tucking those in and folding those over. So it started out at an inch and a half, and I've just like I said, there's no stitching whatsoever that I put on this. All of the stitching that will go on it will be stitching that's done by hand and with a hand needle and thread. So that's ready to go. Let me show you. I had to unpick the very, very fine line of sewing that held these two edges together like this. This is what it looked like before. It's sewn together. You can see that there. And I had to take some very, very sharp, teeny little scissors and go in there and snip those threads so that I could undo this very small seam here so that I could correct and fix, especially the white fabrics that is here. The gold fabric on the back has no tears, it has no marks, it doesn't need anything, but the white fabric on the front is going to be replaced. So that's what I've done. Let me show you those little teeny scissors that I used. These are the scissors that I used for that. Notice they're just very, very small little snippy scissors, and I just would snip each of those little teeny stitches along there. I'll show you as I do this, but I wanted you to see the preparation that I had to do. This is one method of fixing that edging. I'm going to see how I like it. I have another method in mind that I may use, and I'll see which one I like, but I probably will do both of them just for demonstration purposes. I'm going to be sewing this strip right along the old quilting line that was here, and I'm going to be doing that with just a very small stitch that will be hidden under here, just very much like a binding stitch that you would do with the on a binding. I'm not taking the old binding off. I'm keeping the old binding on, and I'm keeping the old backing on and even the batting. And when I get finished with this part of it, then I'll be coming back and tucking this edge right here into the seam in here, and I'll be joining all this back together again the way that it originally was. But for now, I'm just doing this running stitch kind of along this edge to secure this nice, even, and ironed edge down. I'm not doing it by machine because nothing on this was made by machine. And my aunts would be really happy that I cared enough to do it the way that they did it when they first did it. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just taking some stitches to secure this. I go down into the old fabric, take a very small stitch, come back up into that channel, secure it, bring it back through, down into the old fabric, come back up into that little channel area, take a stitch, bring it through. It's not hard, it's not really time consuming, but it is done by hand, and I want it to be done by hand. When I come back to this, I'll show you how to tuck it in so that everything will be just fine. Yes, this fabric is whiter than the old fabric, but that's fine. It's white, and I can't restore the old fabric to the color that this is. I'm just going to have to be happy with as close as I could get. But I can restore it so that it will be a useful quilt again. Hi, I would like to explain a little bit about a special product that I found to help me with the edging. I used two products. I used white cotton, and I liked that. I think it did a great job. But I also found something called tulle, T-U-L-L-E, or netting. It's a fabric that some of the girls are making little tutus out of and little skirts, but you can get it at any fabric store. You can get it online. I got this online. This is a very fine tulle, and I don't know that you can see super well about how fine that is, but what I did around the edge of my quilt is I cut a strip. This is double layered, and so I cut a strip of about 2 inches in the area that I wanted to work on. And I'm just going to do a small patch to show you how to do that. This is very rough, but it will give you the idea. And tulle does come on a bolt if you buy it. I think I've got about 3 or 4 yards right here. But then all you do is you take it to the edge that you want to work on, and I'm going to work right here next to some that I've already done. This edge isn't in bad shape, but it's also not in good shape. So it doesn't need a lot of repair. What it needs is more stabilization. You work from the front to the back. You take the tulle and you fold it to the edge, and then with white thread, since this is white, I'm going to sew that down. Then I'm going to turn it. I'm telling you what I'm doing before I do it. Then I turn it, and I actually go to the back of the quilt to do the same. So the difference in doing this method versus the material method is the material I tucked into the seam. This I will not tuck into the seam. I'll take it to the back and I'll stitch it down. Sit down, please. Okay, you can jump down then. So I have some white thread and I have a sewing needle, and I'm just going to baste that down, and then I'm going to go onto the back and sew it down to the back. And you don't leave the edge raw, you leave the edge, you turn the edge under just like you would turn a bias under. So I can show you the finished product of how I've done that and how nicely it turned out. And I'll zoom in to do that. This is the front of how I have done that, and you'll notice that I have it all turned under here, and I've sewed it down by hand with just a slip stitch going along there. This is the front. Then I flip it to the back, and I have sewed it down with the color of the backing thread. I turned it under here like a hem, and I sewed that right along there. And that keeps that whole edging very, very secure, and this will keep it intact. This is one of the methods that a lot of people who restore quilts use. They even do that over the quilt top sometimes if the quilt top has lots and lots and lots of problems. So I'm not the first person to do this, but I certainly won't be the last either. But that is how you use the tulle fabric and how you sew it on to give your quilt some extra lifetime. This quilt is now completely finished. I've mended all the tears and all the frays. I've done the embroidery work that needed to be done. The biggest job was doing the edging, which I did about 3/4 of the edging on this quilt to make sure that it stays together. And there was minimal hand stitching that I had to do, hand quilting, but it's completed. It's ready to give back to my son for its next generation of life. I have enjoyed this process a lot, and it's brought back a whole ton of really wonderful memories for me on the people that worked on it and on the process that I worked on it also. And I learned so much doing this, just doing these processes that I'd read about or that I was experimenting with. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed it, because it's been a lot of fun and it's also been a lot of great learning. I'm happy to share this with you. I hope that you'll enjoy it. I hope that at some time in your future you may be able to use some of these techniques to restore something that you love. Thanks for joining me. If you can, make sure to give a thumbs up and any subscription to my channel would be highly appreciated. Have a great day and keep quilting. In memory of this quilt and of all those who contributed to it and made it a beautiful piece of art, I'm going to show you some pictures of the people who helped make the quilt and who lived with the quilt and enjoyed it. It's now on to its third generation. First of all, there are pictures of me. There are pictures of my father, who was in World War II as a veteran, my mother, who was a longtime educator and wonderful mother and woman, and then I have also shown you pictures of my mother and all of her sisters in various stages of their lives. Those are the people who mainly contributed to the quilt and who I lovingly remember along with this quilt. And I honor them in this video and appreciate sharing it with you. Thank you.